send this to you. We're officially live now. So welcome everyone. My name is Lakey Love. I use they, them pronouns. I am the co-founder of the Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation. We are here today yet for another solemn and disappointing and actually horrifying press conference to speak out against the Florida Department of Health's recent guidance, very transphobic guidance, very misinformed guidance on transgender issues, gender dysphoria, and social transition and medical gender affirming care for transgender youth. We have an amazing set of advocates and speakers, healthcare practitioners, directly impacted people with us today. It takes a lot of courage to speak out on this issue. And so I'm gonna let our own member, one of our leaders here in the Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation, kick us off. Emily, if you don't mind kicking us off, I'm going to toss the ball to you. And if you are press, please let me know if you need permission to record. And thank you, Emily, for getting us kicked off today on why we're here and why this is such an egregious and abhorrent reason for us to meet.
Hi, my name is Emily Gray. I'm the Transgender Outreach Coordinator for the Bay County LGBTQ Center of Bay County, and I'm also, as like you said, one of the members of the Transgender Coalition, the Coalition for Trans Liberation, right? This announcement from the Department of Health was a shock yesterday. The trans community was very much surprised at this, but also at the same time not surprised. We were expecting something like this to come with all of the legislation that was passed and the fact that other states have done similar things, looking at Texas, for example. So we were expecting it not quite as soon as it happened, but it's egregious in the fact that it claims to be a scientific announcement or announcement based on science anyway, and it's absolutely not. I mean, they used a couple of references that could loosely be called scientific references, and they ignored all of the actual science and all of the actual scientific community and doctors, the APA, all of the pediatricians, like literally anybody that has anything to do with children's healthcare disagrees with what was put out with this statement. And even if there was evidence, which there is absolutely not, that suggests that kids shouldn't be on hormone blockers or anything like that. It says surgeries, but that's also a distractor because that doesn't happen. Surgeries on transgender youth is not a thing that happens. If it does, it's usually someone that's 17 and there's extenuating circumstances. It's a very rare situation. There are no surgeries being performed on young kids like they want you to believe. It's just puberty blockers. But if there was evidence to suggest that was harmful, there's absolutely zero evidence, and actually a mountain of evidence to the contrary of the other statement that said that they even discouraged social transition. And in the same statement, they said they don't recommend social transition, but they do recommend that their family and friends like support them, which seems contrary, and I don't exactly know what they mean when they say that they discourage social transition. But there's a mountain of evidence. The Trevor Project is probably the biggest resource on that. If you go and look at any of the studies and research that they have done, it shows that trans youth that are able to socially transition and have affirming families and friends have a significantly lower suicide rate than trans youth that are not. If trans youth are not allowed to have any kind of affirmation, if they're not allowed to socially transition, the suicide rate is like 41%. When they have affirming parents and they're allowed to socially transition, that drops down into the low single digits. So, I mean, the evidence is overwhelming against what the Florida Department of Health has put out. It's against anything that the federal Department of Health is talking about. It's against anything that any medical person that deals with youth or trans youth has said. The evidence, the studies that they use are flawed. They don't delve into the actual science of it. One of the studies that they use to suggest that 80% of youth that end up detransitioning, part of that evidence was because they couldn't get in touch with a big majority of the participants when they followed up with them. And because they couldn't get in touch with them, instead of saying we couldn't get in touch with them, they said we can't get in touch with them, therefore they must not have gender issues anymore, and so they have detransitioned. And that's not scientific at all. That's the absolute opposite of science. So the studies they used are flawed. It can be proven. It is proven. By all means, look up the studies. All of the actual evidence used by the major scientists and doctors that work with trans youth has been peer-reviewed, verified, and is accurate. This was a political attack against trans youth in order to get votes for this administration, and it's sickening, to be honest. That's what I had. Lakey, did you need me to cover anything else?
I think that's great. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Our next speaker is an ally from Women's March Florida, who has stood with us throughout the battle on the attack on trans youth at the legislative and executive branch level. So it is my honor to welcome next to the floor Carrie Feit from Women's March Florida.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Feit, and thanks so much, Lakey. My name is Carrie Feit, and organizationally, I represent Women's March Florida's deep commitment to this fight against the unconscionable attack on our LGBTQ youth. But I also come here today to speak as a parent of school-aged kids and as an ally to the LGBTQ community. And I want to again thank Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation and all of the organizations here on the front lines for including me. While I can't speak from a medical or research perspective with regard to the Florida Department of Health's politically driven and extremely cruel and dangerous healthcare advisory, I can speak out about the absence of this conversation, the absence of outrage and voiced concern amongst most of the parent spaces, whether it's local PTAs or other dominant culture spaces in which I find myself. As a parent in a cis straight family structure, which comes with power and privilege, I feel a deep obligation to fight for the liberty of other families and for our children against invisibilization and violence. Yet my plea to others with the same cultural power falls on deaf ears, which in part has led us to being here. There was silence when we learned about some teachers' refusal to use correct pronouns and names or insist on binary gendered activities. There was silence and even a refusal to educate when our legislature was ripping trans girls away from their teammates and said they couldn't play sports. There was silence when we watched Florida strip away gender anti-discrimination protections, even when there were public cries from elementary school trans kids about being forced to use bathrooms away from their peers on the other side of the school. And there was silence when we made it unlawful for teachers and schools to provide safe spaces for our LGBTQ kids or families to exist. For those who this message reaches, the time to be silent is over. If you have even an ounce of humanity, you'll speak out in your parent spaces, because attacks on our children's existence is not a political opinion you get to stay out of. The validity and purity of the way our children feel inside is not up for debate, and the ability for them to be who they are, else tortured internally, is not a fight from which any parent can recuse themselves, especially parents or groups of parents with cultural power. There's a war on our children. Some of them are trying to be erased or stamped out or forced to assimilate, which typically does not end well. These attacks are rooted in things that have nothing to do with values or tradition, but they present to us as fears and threats of kids, quote unquote, turning gay or quote unquote, becoming trans. Collectively, we have the power to quash that shameful scare tactic, to change those mental models. Parents with platforms, parents with influence in your community, we need to talk about what is happening meaningfully and often, and we need to rise up as parents and allies and protect our kids. If not us, then who? Again, thank you so much. It is a true honor for me to be here today.
Thank you, Carrie, and appreciate your call out to cisgender and privileged allies. We are not going to be able to win this battle without your support. Next is my honor to invite to the floor Dr. Sujatha Prabhakaran, representing Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. Thank you, Dr. Prabhakaran, for joining us today.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Lakey, for that introduction. So I'm Dr. Sujatha Prabhakaran. My pronouns are she.her, and I'm outraged by the statement on the part of the Florida Department of Health. Politicians really have no place in interfering with patients. Yeah, I'm going to get teary. I'm sorry. With patients in their medical care. We've cared for trans and gender diverse patients for decades. And we've provided gender affirming hormone therapy for the last 5 years. Actually, I just need a sec to click myself. It is really just, as a physician caring for these patients, I know that this guidance from the Florida Department of Health puts youth in harm's way. It's cruel to use the healthcare of children and adolescents as a political playground to attack and attempt to erase the trans and gender diverse community in Florida. I am so sorry. Clearly the science here, so medical research overwhelmingly supports healthcare that centers the experience and the needs of trans youth. The research, as has been mentioned here before, extensively and deeply supports that comprehensive affirming care for trans youth provides better quality of life for our patients. When young people need hormone replacement therapy, birth control, their annual wellness visits, or other service, they're entitled to respectful and evidence-based care. At Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida, we will persist in offering the healthcare that our trans, non-binary, and gender expansive young patients deserve. They deserve care that's evidence-based, age-appropriate, and affirming, and we will be here for that. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Lakey. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhakaran, and please don't apologize for your passion and your empathy and the work that you do. We appreciate your being here today and having the courage. So next, I want to, it is my honor, as always, it's my honor to work with this person to bring a former elementary school teacher who works directly with youth and is very knowledgeable in this area and to the floor. Please help me welcome Cyrus Bressack.
My name is Cyrus Bressack. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a member of the Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation. I'm also an educator and a former elementary school teacher. I am alarmed specifically by the part of this guidance that discourages social transition. I believe that is one of the most dangerous aspects of this guidance released by the Florida Health Department, and it's the aspect that I feel I have the expertise to speak on. Social transition is often the first step for transgender people, regardless of their age. It is broad and varies from person to person. Social transition can include changing the way you dress or present yourself, as well as changing your name or pronouns. A big part of social transition is having your true gender acknowledged by the people in your life. According to the Trevor Project, transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse youth who have had their pronouns respected by all of the people they live with attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected by anyone in their life. To show how significant that is, another study found that 82% of trans people have reported considering suicide, and 40% have actually attempted suicide. Those numbers are heartbreaking. As someone who has gone through social transition, I can testify that the way people react to your gender expression directly impacts your relationship with that person, as well as your own mental well-being. The people in my life who either struggled to accept my social transition or steadfastly refused to do so were no longer my confidants. They were no longer someone I trusted. And that relationship is not one that can be repaired. The guidelines released by the Florida Health Department discourage social transition. The very thing that, when met with acceptance, has been shown to cut in half the already astronomically high trans suicide rate. And it does so with zero medical intervention. Point blank, this guidance is fear-mongering, and it will come at the expense of our children. In its aftermath, we will see a rise in the trans youth suicide rate. It has been made painfully clear that trans people, and specifically trans youth, are not safe in Florida. When presented with a social transition, Florida has proved that they cannot be our confidants and that they cannot be trusted. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus, and thank you for speaking to the areas that you know so well. I'm also terrified by this mention of social transition, and so I'm feeling you on that in a really strong and powerful way. We've only had just a little bit of time to get a hold of our feelings and react, and so please bear with us as we are all trudging through the mess that is the Florida Department of Health, apparently. So next, it is my honor to welcome a very strong advocate in the community for marginalized people, as well as a healthcare practitioner herself. Warm welcome to Jamarah Amani.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you to all the speakers that shared before me. This is definitely an emotional moment. I am speaking as a mother and as a healthcare provider. And so as a healthcare provider, for those who may not know, the governor of my state yesterday issued guidelines instructing healthcare providers to deny life-saving, gender-affirming treatment to children. It came right to my email inbox because I'm a licensed provider. And I'm used to receiving these type of bulletins from the state, but this one had a completely different nature. It sounded more like a right-wing blog than health guidance. I was not ready for the vitriol, the pseudoscience, and the hate that was in this bulletin. And as a Black queer mother of a transgender son, a midwife, and a survivor of various pregnancy outcomes, I feel like Governor Ron DeSantis is coming for my family, for everything I am and everyone I love this year, and it's only April. So I'm here today to stand with transgender children, non-binary children, gender variant children, gender expansive people, parents and family members and loved ones of all types of folks who may not fit into the mainstream binary notions of gender and whose healthcare matters deeply, whose lives matter deeply. And to anyone who knows a transgender person, who cares about transgender children, who has had the opportunity to be in the grace and presence of someone who is expanding our notions of what it means to be human, which I believe every trans person is doing, especially our trans children who are in the curiosity of defining, themselves and digging into gender fluidity, which really makes all of us a lot more free. And so transness has been a part of humanity from the beginning of humanity. It's nothing new. And we have the opportunity to honor this way of being by supporting people, by providing systems of care that uplift the very human right to live and to be healthy and whole. And so I'm calling on everyone who has had the opportunity, and even if you haven't yet, to be exposed to what it means to allow variant genders, the universe of gender, to flourish. I'm calling on every one of us to stand against this bulletin, to stand against any agenda or legislation or any restrictions that prevent whole people, real people, from being the fullness of themselves and being cared for by their community. And that's exactly what this does. And so it's our responsibility to say, no, we will not have it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. When I was on the phone with Jamarah Amani last night, she mentioned what it was like to be a healthcare practitioner and then have that the guidance pop up. And of course, I found out another way because I'm not a healthcare practitioner. But I just want to say that in a time of crisis, going through COVID, we've seen the recent reports that COVID has made transition and living as an out transgender and gender diverse youth much more difficult, narrowly isolating children to their homes and taking them away from inclusive spaces. And so to have our state do this right now and to tell healthcare practitioners that what they're doing is the wrong thing is just an abomination. And I think plenty of people have mentioned it here, but I just want to remind everyone how important it is that we have these healthcare practitioners that are willing to stand up and speak out. And so next to the microphone, backing up in the healthcare field, but more in the mental health and social work field, I have the honor of bringing Jaki Neering, an LCSW from Inspire Recovery, to the floor to speak about this issue. Thank you, Jaki.
Thank you, Lakey. It is like, it's emotional, it's overwhelming, it's everything all wrapped in one. So I too might break a little bit, but I'm a LCSW, trauma-informed certified trans-affirming therapist who works with the trans community day in, day out. And you know, and what the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this guidance yesterday too, come to my email as a clinical social worker, here's your updated notice, you know, and everything that I was reading on that form goes against my code of ethics, right? I'm bound by the NASW code of ethics, and everything in that goes against that, right? There's 6 core values that I live by being a social worker, right? Importance of human relationships. Obviously, this would destroy that with all of my clients, right? Dignity and worth of a person. Nope, can't do that. Service, competence, right? Like people writing this, like where is their trans affirming competence, right? Where is the research, right? Like where are the trans voices in this statement? So like that was the first thing that came to my mind, you know, and then I started reflecting a little bit, and you know, every client that I talk to says, oh, if only when I was a kid, right? If only I would have been able to be my authentic self as a kid. If only, right? I wouldn't be addicted to drugs. I wouldn't have been self-harming for the last 20 years of my life. I wouldn't have been struggling with the anxiety and the depression and the self-harm, like on and on. So it's just so like, it's evident and it's so clear that the social, we call it interventions. I know everybody calls it transition. I don't even believe it's a transition, right? Because that's saying that you're changing from one to another. The reality is, right, if somebody tells me I was a female at 3 years old, you've always been, right? So it's not transitioning from one to another. So it's an intervention, social interventions, medical interventions, sure. Transition, I don't know if that word is fitting. So to hear about our social interventions, the interventions that I implement day in, day out, that reduces suicidality, that reduces self-harm, that reduces anxiety, reduces, so like the idea that the social interventions will not be able to be implemented is like mind-blowing. So, you know, and then I think too, like the developmental trauma, right? The developmental trauma of being raised the wrong gender, it's not the incongruence, right? It's society rejecting. It's the parents and the teachers saying, no, you can't, you're not this because you're that, right? That's where the developmental disruptions come from. So I've spent the last 5 years getting really proficient in understanding the developmental disruption, the developmental trauma. We call it the trauma of gender dysphoria, not the external gender dysphoria, nothing physical. I'm talking about the mental and the emotional trauma of gender dysphoria, the trauma of being raised the wrong gender, the trauma of being raised in a cis society that rejects gender diversity. So like, and like, where's the competence? Where's these voices in our Department of Health? That's what I want to know. So, you know, yes, we have this Department of Health that I'm bound to, right? And then it's like, it's mind, like I said, I can't even wrap my head around it because it's still so disturbing that like something that my license is bound to is in complete opposition of who I am and how I live and how I serve clients. So yeah, I just keep thinking of competence, and like I do feel like a competent trans affirming trauma informed therapist, and I just wish that I could be out there in including this information in the competence in our Department of Health, right? So yeah, obviously social interventions are life-saving interventions, right? Hormone blockers, life-saving interventions in order to be able to save our trans and gender diverse folks. So yeah, like I said, just so much emotion going on. And those were just the things that popped in my head that I felt so drawn to share about. So I appreciate everybody who has shared. Lakey, I appreciate you putting this together and all the voices, and like, you know, and yes, it does, part of it feels like a risk to even be like speaking. And then at the same time, you know, it's like the opposite is like paralyzed. Like, it's like, I just know that my passion and what I do, like getting out and joining this force is where I need to be, and it's no other place I'd rather be. So I just appreciate you all for letting me share a little bit of my heart with you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Really appreciate it, and check the chat box because you got a lot of good feedback. So thank you for sharing all that and having the courage to be here. So next, I want to bring to the microphone a long-term advocate in the health field, especially for marginalized people. It's my honor to bring Alison Yager from the Florida Health Justice Project to the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Lakey, for calling this meeting. I'm sorry we all have to be here for this reason today. My name is Alison Yager. I'm the Executive Director of Florida Health Justice Project. My pronouns are she, her. And this is indeed an emotional morning. I'm going to start in my professional capacity, and then I'm going to share a little in my personal capacity. I want to emphasize the point that others have made, how critical it is that politicians stay out of doctor-patient relationships. Medical experts, professional medical associations in pediatrics, endocrinology, psychiatry, psychology, all support gender-affirming medical care. Politicians should not, in the name of culture wars and for scoring cheap political points, be interfering in key medical decisions between doctors and their patients. And I want to just elevate a policy statement written by the American Academy of Pediatrics a handful of years ago, before all of this really dug in on this very issue. The American Academy of Pediatrics states that the AAP works toward all children and adolescents, regardless of gender identity or expression, receiving care to promote optimal physical, mental, and social well-being. Any discrimination based on gender identity or expression, real or perceived, is damaging to the socio-emotional health of children, families, and society. In particular, the AAP recommends the following: that youth who identify as TGD have access to comprehensive, gender-affirming, and developmentally appropriate health care that is provided in a safe and inclusive clinical space. That's a direct quote. And the list then goes on. So let our kids be healthy kids as understood by the medical professionals. We know that this guidance, and it's likely only the first step of numerous that we're going to see coming from our state and our elected officials, we know that this guidance and this trend will make Florida unsafe and unhealthy for trans youth. Speaking as the mother of a trans young person, I want to say that I see firsthand the threat that this sort of policy poses. Yesterday, when I shared the news of this policy with my 12-year-old trans child, they said to me, "Just let me live. Just let me live." Our governor this session has signed into law the Don't Say Gay bill, which was passed in the name of parental rights. But I say, what about my parental rights? What about my family's right to choose what is right for our child without the interference of the state in the name of culture wars? We're being told that Florida is the freest state. This is not freedom. This is the inverse of freedom. I implore and I demand of our policymakers and our legislators, let gender diverse children be free. Let our families live in peace. And I ask of others who believe in freedom, who believe in healthcare access, who believe in the most basic expression of human dignity, to speak out in this very dangerous moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the bringing the AAP quote in. It's important, even in our cursory research, to try to debunk the Florida Department of Health citations, right? We've uncovered a beehive, a hornet's nest of false science, right? Backed by the National Catholic Bioethics Center and skewed religious and right-leaning organizations like the Heritage Foundation. So it's really important that people realize that that this is a claim of pseudoscience that is not backed by all the major American medical fields and associations, for everything from psychiatry to the American Medical Association to the American Academy of Pediatrics. So thank you for calling that out and reminding us that the Florida Department of Health shouldn't be leaning into false science, right? And to create guidelines for health practitioners. And it is my honor to bring next to the floor a loud and outspoken leader in the mental health and service community with youth, speaking for the Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation, Welcome, DW.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lakey, for putting this press conference together today. My name is DW, and I am the CEO of the leading queer and transgender affirming behavioral health center in the country, located right here in West Palm Beach, Florida. I am also a genderqueer person. Transgender and queer folk come to Palm Beach County, Florida from all over the country to seek life-saving, trauma-informed, transgender affirming care. We don't consider ourselves to be a progressive or woke company by any means. We offer a standard of care that is humane and is best practices. This care should be the standard in all behavioral health and healthcare settings. It's more than embarrassing that the Florida Department of Health should put guidelines out against standard life-saving interventions for the transgender community. I am deeply concerned about the state of Florida and for the protection of transgender folk, their families, and their medical practitioners. I could say these people are the current heroes for the transgender community, but in reality, they are doing what all parents ought to do and all medical professionals ought to do when they decided to have kids or join the medical or healthcare profession. Parents and medical professionals providing this standard of care for transgender people is the same as parents offering food and shelter to their children and medical professionals stitching up a wound after a kid has fallen. Transgender affirming care, as we know it today, is just a standard. It's the baseline. And to deny this best practice standard to our transgender community is life-threatening. What parent and medical professional can, in good consciousness, practice life-threatening parenting and medical care? I'm inclined to believe that our Department of Health in Florida is better than this and would not knowingly publish these guidelines that are life-threatening to our transgender community. I would like to give them the opportunity to correct this. The Department of Health is our licensing agency of Florida. This is a trusted agency, and to continue to have the trust of people who care about people, the professionals they license, and the lives they have the ability to affect, deadly or life-saving. We urge you to correct this life-threatening error before it costs the lives of Florida's loved ones. If our state continues to attack the LGBTQIA+ community, I can only beg President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, who vowed to protect this community, to step in and stop this war in our country, in my state, and to be the heroes we voted you to be. Thank you so much.
Woot, woot. Thank you, DW. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that. And last to the floor, and last for the reason, because we always have to drop the mic after she speaks. We are happy to bring to the floor Delilah Pierre, the field director for the Tallahassee Community Action Committee.
Thank you so much for letting me speak today. I have the utmost respect and faith in Lakey, not just as a political organizer with the incredible work they have been doing, fighting for trans youth, fighting for trans people on the front lines, but also because they were one of the first people that I ever really came out to and talked about my transition and talked about my gender identity with. And it felt so, incredibly freeing to have a conversation with someone that could trust and support me, and felt so incredibly freeing in college to also build these conversations and relationships with people who I trusted, who I loved. It felt amazing, you know, to finally have this space where I could exist and be myself without the constant, intense societal punishment and pressure that I felt to conform to my gender identity. And it was murdering me. It was murdering me. And I had to sit there and take it every single day. And I had to sit there and take it every single day. And it wasn't just my parents' fault. It was our society's fault. It was our infrastructure's fault. It was our system's fault. Our system has already been failing transgender children, been failing gender diverse children, been failing non-binary children. Our system doesn't teach about us in history. They don't teach about the queer and trans movements in history. They don't teach about the years and years and years of gender science that have been done and taken to prove that transition does work, that it is scientifically possible and accurate, that it is valid. This has been work that has been being done since the 1890s in Germany. This has been work that's been being done for an entire century. And yet, we know that the Florida government cares more about pseudoscience and cares more about maintaining their own political control and operation than they care about anyone else. This is not just an attack on the trans community. This is an attack on everybody. This is not just an attack on the LGBTQ plus community. This is an attack on everyone who dares to exist outside of the very strict confines of gender, the binaries that have been created by Christian and conservative forces that they want to keep and maintain. And this attack has more than its legal repercussions, as people have gladly gone into and explained in depth. This attack also allows for extra legal attacks to be justified and validated in our country, and especially in the state of Florida, and a place where trans women, especially Black trans women, have one of the highest rates of death in the world. This attack allows things like that to happen. This attack says to kids on the playground, well, I can treat you differently because I know you act different, you are different. And as much as they try to play around and say that a kid can, that most of these kids are gonna ID with their birth, sex, and gender identity, people know when you're transgender. They know when you're queer. They know when you're femme-presenting, even if not all the time, sometimes they do know. And the children who are being bullied for it, who are being punished for it, who are being attacked and targeted for it, will not only have to deal with their bullies' attacks and targetment, but the isolation and even the bullying of their faculty and their fellow teachers. That is what this legislation does. That is why Ron DeSantis keeps on creating these very vague, widespread bills to instill fear into our population and to allow far right and reactionary actors to be able to do whatever they want. He says to the fascists and the white supremacists, go out there and do whatever you want, take control of the society and make people scared. And that's why they do it. Transgender people as a class of people are already in so many ways, especially in the state of Florida, treated as subhuman in our country. We're given so little, we're given scraps, and we're expected to take that and see that as honor. I'm not happy that President Biden just said that trans people deserve to be respected. I want to see action. I want to see legislation. I want to see work, because I haven't seen a damn thing since he's been in office. What's happening? Because certainly no one's ever doing any work to stop Ron DeSantis from taking these illegal and unethical procedural changes, from putting and instituting this unscientific bias into our programs. And this has so many long-term effects that we won't even see. And the reason why Ron DeSantis is starting with transgender youth and transgender children is because transgender youth and transgender children are the easiest to be isolated, targeted, and attacked. That's the only reason why he's starting with transgender youth, because then it's going to accelerate and come to effect and target all transgender people. And then it's going to be used to pass laws and bills that target queer people. And then it's going to be used to pass laws to target women who exist outside of the necessary binary of what people expect women to exist within. This is a perfect example of the recent cases we've seen beyond Leah Thomas being judged for being a transgender woman in swimming. This happens to cisgender women as well, to Black cisgender women especially, but to cisgender women of color especially. And this is important to recognize in this political struggle, because this is not just about us, and this effect doesn't just come towards us. This isn't one statement. This is a plan they have to make us non-existent in the state, to make us second class in the state, to make it exist in a society where, like in the past in the United States, transgender people can be abused, targeted, and harassed by police, institutional forces, and facility, and they can get away with it. So they can make our hormone replacement therapy, our transitions expensive and profitable for them, not us. Thank you to everyone who came here today. It is so wonderful to see how many people are out here fighting for our community. And I know that we will continue to fight and struggle and organize together for change. This is the first step. We can't stop with this press conference. We have to be organizing constantly and fighting constantly, just like Lakey always is. And that's tiring, because the work is sometimes on 1 or 2 or 3 people, but together, when we unite with each other, the work becomes all of ours. And our ability to change things, our ability to make things better is something that can and will happen. In Tallahassee, Lakey, but in conjunction with the Tallahassee Community Action Committee, was able to pass the most inclusive conversion therapy ban in the state of Florida. And it's still one of my most amazing memories. You know, it was amazing to see what kind of work and advocacy we could do with a small group of people. Imagine 100, 120, 150, 200 activists organizing constantly, dedicating their time to fight for our struggle. We could win. We could make this state and this country a place that's safe for transgender people. We can make sure that parents don't have to worry about their kids being targeted or harassed, that trans people don't have to worry about dying or being affected by these policies. We can make it so that we are truly safe, that we have a fair and ethical society that everyone deserves to live in, and so that we have the kind of autonomy that we need so our society can progress forward. Instead of focusing on this reactionary legislation and bills that do nothing except keep the Republican Party in power and allow them to set their campaign to make us second-class citizens, as well as keep themselves in a place where they can't be targeted or challenged whatsoever. So I say, please join the Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation. Join the Tallahassee Community Action Committee. Get out into your communities and see what you can do to stand up and fight for transgender children, for queer children. It's important. This is going to affect not just us, but everyone, even if that's an eventual step. I hope you continue to fight with us, and I love you all. We need to stand in solidarity with each other more now than ever.
Oh, whew. You all see why we end with Delilah, because there's nothing that can be said after that. I have given everyone the ability to be able to unmute themselves. So thank you again, Delilah, for bringing us home and reminding us the power that the people have when we stick together, and the impacts that we can have on each other if we show up with inclusion and support, instead of, as Jaki put it, trauma and interventions, right? We need our interventions to be supportive and inclusive, and I love you and appreciate you. So we have run over time, and I'm not going to apologize for that, because we're going to be over time all the time and battling this stuff for the next I don't know, as long as it takes. So if there are any press that have questions, I have not been able to keep up with the chat. So if you wrote it in the chat, I'm so sorry. You'll either have to write it again, or you can come off mute and ask questions to our panelists. Is there any press that has
You're muted, Lakey.
You're still muted, Lakey.
Thanks. But you all can unmute yourselves, right? Not just my panelists. Okay, was I muted when I was saying that we're opening the floor for the press? No, okay. I see one hand raised, and let me see who it is. Just go ahead and go off off mute and ask the question if you're press. I see Emily has her hand raised, but let's wait for the press to ask. Are there any questions from the press? Because we're going to shut down the recording. If not, it's the last chance, y'all. Okay. Thank you to all of our panelists and speakers. I'm going to let you all stay on after I turn the recording off and let people come off and just thank you themselves, because I think you all deserve a big round of applause for this.